Good morning. We're here at Bob's Market Greenhouse and Garden Center, where we're going to construct a Buwatec tank. It's a tank that is 13.2 feet in diameter and about 15 feet tall. We're going to put it here on the floor. We've laid out the first ring already. Before we did that, we cleaned the floor, swept it clear, and vacuumed it so that there are no pebbles that might affect the liner. And then we've placed the liner and the felt inside the tank. We'll come over here, we'll have a look at it. The bottom ring is of coated metal, so it has extra protection against moisture, and that will keep the tank durable and maintain its integrity for years to come. We've set this at a place on the floor where we have sufficient room at the back wall to get past the tank. And we've left floor space for an additional tank in front, plus a pump skid behind that.
Start by making out a circle on the concrete floor where the tank will be placed. So you're going to draw a circle, find the center, and decide where on the floor you're going to place the tank. Be sure that you have enough space around the tank, on the outside of the tank, to do your work, to fit ladders, and to be able to walk around the tank after the tank is built. Inspect the floor area inside and around the tank circle to ensure that it is smooth, removing any protrusions from the concrete that might create a hole in the liner. You want to make sure that the floor is smooth, that there's nothing on the concrete like bits of cement that might impact the liner. We certainly do not want to have any holes in the liner. Vacuum the floor area inside and around the tank circle to ensure that it is completely clear of any particulate that might create a hole. Place the box or boxes with the felt and the liner somewhere inside where the tank circle would be, so that you do not have to lift them into the tank later on. Place the first two panels on the circle, sliding the right panel in behind the left one. Insert the bolts from the inside of the tank through the two rows of holes that are involved in the overlap. Tighten them down to 20 Newton meters. And then secure the two panels to the floor with an angle bracket using a second nut over the first one. But you want to not attach them to the floor until you've put the tank half full of water, so that it gets a chance to find its placement on the floor with water in the tank. Make sure that you put the panels in a circular fashion where the tank is going to be right on the mark that you placed. You do not want to be sliding the panels on the floor, because especially on a rough floor, you do not want to create any abrasion on the coated sheets. You want to protect them as long as possible, because they are preventing rusts from getting to the galvanizing or getting through the galvanizing. Construct the tank in a counterclockwise direction by sliding each successive panel behind the previous one while holding the bottom right-hand corner of the new panel with a screwdriver through a hole in the panel below it.
Okay, so we've already set the first ring, and we've bolted, except for the top row bolts where we have to put the next panel, the next ring is going to be attached here. We've hand tightened all the bolts right down to the bottom. We've also, for extra protection, we've filled the holes at the bottom of the tank. Even though they don't connect to anything, we don't want any puncture of the liner with a broom or a screwdriver or anything. So just for insurance purposes, we've put an extra bolt in those holes. With the liner, in the box for the liner, when you unpack, you will find extra patches for the liner, plus the patch kit, plus the ropes that hold the liner to the tank top. Okay, and the taping, the tape that's used for the boot being taped to the pipe, the outlet pipe and the overflow pipe that are going to go on that side of the tank. In the bag for the felt, are plastic strips that will attach the felt to the top ring of the tank once we get to the top, and some tie wraps to hold it in place. Plus, you'll also find the bungee cords that are used to attach the span cover to the tank top. In the delivery, we have bolts and nuts, and they come in these white pails here. So these pails contain that material. There were 4 pails for this order, 2 for tank 2 and 2 for tank 1. And then over here on this side of the tank is where our outlet pipe hole is going to be cut. All right. It will be coming straight out. The outlet pipe will be in the center of this panel coming straight out, and it will be attached to a header to connect to the second tank once we build it. When we set the first ring here, I offset this a little bit from the joints, because here we have a joint between 2 panels, and here we have a joint between 2 panels, okay? But for the second ring, once we build the second ring, we're going to have a joint over here. So in order for us to do the 6th ring, once we get that high, I want to make sure that the overflow pipe doesn't run into that joint that would be at the top if I was to put it over here in the middle, okay? So this panel is not set in the center, it's set to the right of center for that reason, okay? The next thing we're going to do is we are going to work on putting the second ring together. We will put ladders inside the tank so that as we build the tank higher and higher, we can reach the bolt holes from inside the tank and insert the bolts through the holes. And so somebody will be working in the tank and somebody else will be a partner on the outside of the tank. And we'll just keep going from there, building it up. Okay, so we're finishing off the 3rd ring right now. Because we're coming out the end of the 3rd ring, we're gonna have to slide this one in behind it. Okay, and we gotta be high enough in the middle there. Okay, this goes in behind. And then we push against the center so that the bolt holes in the middle will line up. And it helps to work with the punch tools to line the holes up. Oh, thank you.
So basically you're building the tank where if you were to look at it, it would look like a brick wall, so that each successive panel in the ring above it is offset halfway from the one before it. Insert the bolts through the holes in the tank panels from the inside and hand tighten the nuts onto the bolts at first. Then tighten the nuts of the previous ring to 20 Newton meter torque, working upward until all panels are installed and all bolts are tightened to 20 Newton meters. It's good to have a group of a couple people working with a torque wrench behind the main group of people who are putting the panels together.
So right here we are tightening all the bolts in the tank, starting from the bottom, working our way up to 20 Newton meters with a torque wrench. There's a guy inside the tank who's holding an Allen key for the guy on the outside of the tank who's doing the tightening. There's a lot of bolts, so we want to make sure they stick to their pattern so that they don't miss any.
So you're going to do the 2 rows of bolts that connect 2 panels together from top to bottom or bottom to top, and then you're going to want to make sure that you pick up each of the center bolts in the ring below it or above it as you're going around the tank. You can go higher than 1 or 2 layers You just want to make sure that you tighten by hand sufficiently so that the tank isn't too loose before they go to secure all the bolts with the torque wrench. Once the tank is built, you then vacuum the floor area inside the tank to prepare for the felt and the liner. The tank sitting on a concrete floor will be vertical. It's kind of hard for it not to be vertical if it's sitting on a flat floor. And you can check the diameter for all panels around the tank. If you do that, you should check it in at least 2 directions so that you can confirm that the tank is circular. Drill the holes for the outlet and overflow pipes, one above the other, according to the Buwatec outlet drawing. Use an appropriate drill saw, only slightly larger, 1/8 of an inch than the outside pipe diameter. When you're determining the exact hole location, the reinforcement panel bolts should line up with the hills of the corrugations on the outside of the tank. This will place the center of the hole in a valley for drilling. Be sure to catch all the drill filings. Okay, so on this particular tank, we are actually not using the full height of the last ring. We want to make sure we clear the trusses by about 10 inches or a foot. So what we've done here is they've provided us with a special ring that has the middle hole section drilled out, which is normally not seen in lower sections. That is so that we can create more overlap between the top of the second ring, which behind this ring is coming right here. And so we're overlapping basically about a foot and leaving the top ring about 2/3 of the ring above the second ring. And then in order to make sure that we're able to pull the liner over the top of the tank and meet up with the bottom of this ring, we had to drill through the second ring so that we can have our bolt holes. We can provide the bolts to tie the ropes off and to pull the bungee cords over. The hook is for the rope for the liner, and the bungee cord is for the washers for the bungee cord for the cover. Okay, and beyond that, we've got the overflow hole already drilled in here. We're going to be attaching this plate to the tank right here, center of the hole. And what's going to happen here is the bolt holes line up with the hills on the outside of the tank. So when we drilled this hole, we drilled in the middle of the valley, okay? We're almost to the center of this top ring with this hole. That gives it the most strength around the tank for the holes and the reinforcement plate to attach to it. And you can see if you come around here, you'll see that the center's lining up. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to mark the holes that need to be drilled in the hills here, and then we're going to bolt this plate to the tank. Keep in mind that the overflow pipe is to be drilled directly above the outlet pipe. You need to think about positioning the tank directly when you start, so that when you get to the top panel for the overflow pipe, you're able to drill it through the panel where it's not being drilled through a seam between two panel connections. So you need to consider this right from the first panel that is placed on the floor as to where the overflow pipe is going to be drilled through so many rings later. Again, right above the outlet pipe. From the BUWaLiner installation instructions, open up the bottom insulation blanket and spread it over the floor. If it's in two sections, use gaffer tape to tape them together. Allow the blanket to climb up the wall about 2 inches, cut off any excess. So you need to make sure that when you pull the liner felt out across the floor, that it reaches both sides of the tank, so that you're not shortening yourself if you run too high up the wall on one side of the tank, that you don't have enough for the other side of the tank. Before you do the tank walls, you should check the connections between the steel panels on the inside of the tank. Use some tape to cover off those spots where you think the edge or the corner of the steel panel might be a concern. Open up the wall blanket and pin it to the top of the tank walls using the clothespin clips provided. So the wall blanket is going to be raised up, and of course it's a rectangular piece of blanket. So you need to orient it so that basically the height of the wall blanket is going to be about 1.5 feet greater than the tank height. This will allow some of the wall blanket to lay over the top edge of the tank and down the sides to about 1 foot or so, and having another 10 inches or so in the tank on the bottom on the floor. You don't want to have too much wall blanket laying on the floor, because it'll create too much overlap and it's hard to get that to kind of fit on the floor. Replace the clips with plastic strips and hold them down with tie wraps through the unused bolt holes. When you then push the strip down over the edge and hold the other end of the strip up a little bit so that it forces the sides of the strip to open up apart from each other so that it slides easily over the tank edge. Allow no space between them so that you have a nice smooth edge for the liner without any gaps that might cut into the liner. Number 4, remove the liner from the box and remove the box from the tank. This can be done even before you build the tank too high, just so it's a little easier to do. Spread the liner out over the blanket and on the floor of the tank. Be sure that the outlet boots line up with the outlet holes. So that's very critical. You don't want to have any stress being put on those outlet boots by twisting the tank liner in order to get it into place. It's important so that we don't have any unnecessary pull on the liner. Bring the edge of the liner down to the third corrugation valley on the outside from the top of the tank and tighten the strap all the way around the tank, or otherwise secure it with the rope supplied. Most of the indoor tanks will have a rope supplied, so by making sure that the overflow pipe lies in front of its hole and boot position, that will help you to decide exactly where you're going to position the liner over the top edge of the tank. You want to have some slack between the boot for the overflow pipe and the top of the tank, but you may want to come down to the 4th or 5th valley to do so. For the rope option, install the hooks, washers, and nuts around the tank on the bolts that join the first and second rings from the top of the tank. Then feed the rope through the grommets in the edge of the liner and around each of these hooks until the entire liner is secured in place. When you feed the rope through the grommets in the edge of the liner, I find it best to try to keep the cords running straight up to the respective hole. So from the hook straight up to the hole in the liner closest above it. Then between grommets, if you run the rope behind the liner, you can keep a lot of the rope hidden, and by running the ropes kind of as straight as possible in a vertical position, you'll keep them a little bit cleaner, free of dust that's going to accumulate over time. Plus it gives a nicer looking tank than a zigzag pattern with a lot of rope showing on the outside of the tank. Insert a length of the outlet and overflow pipe through each of their respective holes, so there is about 3 feet inside the tank and about 2 feet outside the tank. Stretch the boot over the end of the pipe and cut off the excess. Then slide the boot down the pipe and scrunch it up against the tank wall, leaving plenty of room along the pipe for taping, with about a foot or so of bare pipe beyond the taped area. One thing that is important in this is that when you're pulling the boot over the pipe, you want to pull it as tightly as possible so that the pipe is actually stretching the liner of the boot before you cut it off. So that when you cut the excess off, the liner is actually stretched on the pipe, and you slide it down the pipe, and it's really the liner stretched on the pipe that's creating the seal, and you're simply going to tape over that to make sure that it doesn't have a chance to leak through that seal. Boot taping. There are 2 rolls of tape provided with the liner boot. A roll of gray butyl tape that goes on first, and then a roll of black tape that goes on second. The gray tape is started on the pipe a couple inches above the top of the boot. It is to be pulled tight the entire time that it is wound around the pipe. Wind down to a few inches past the top of the boot, and then wind back up past the starting point, covering it completely. Again, make sure that it is put on securely by tightening on the tape the entire time. Just be careful not to pull a fold in the edge of the boot at the pipe, creating a potential leak. Use an even overlap while taping, and afterward rub the tape layers together with a cloth. Remember that the stretch tape must provide the seal. Repeat the same with the black tape, starting a few inches above the gray tape and covering the gray tape completely by winding down to a few inches past the bottom, then winding back up past the starting point. By doing so, the last layer overlaps the one before like shingles on a rooftop. Note that it is likely to take the better part of a roll of each tape to do this. When you go to mount the pipe on unistrut, because you need to secure it outside the tank, you'd want to make sure that the pipe is sitting in the center of the hole so that it has equal space around the hole on the outside of the pipe. That way you ensure that the pipe is centered in the hole, and it makes sure that you never have a chance that some of the liner can get forced through the hole, or even the felt behind the liner, because there's going to be a lot of pressure coming in from the water pressure inside the tank, forcing that liner up against the sidewall of the tank, and we don't want to see any of that liner possibly coming through around the edge of the pipe and the edge of the hole. Fill the tank to a minimum level of 400 millimeters once the tank construction has been completed to hold it in place. So yeah, once you've got the tank set and done, you're going to want to fill your pipe up to at least a place where you're covering the outlet pipe, and you're also filling all your pipes with water so that filled your system. because you don't want to have air pockets in your system. And having the tank half full of water will help to make sure that the hoop stress acting on the steel will force the walls outward a little bit and help keep the tank round, and allows you to secure it to the floor when there's water in the tank, which is the general condition of the tank when it's being used.